Live pictures from Parliament buildings in Nairobi as the MPs in the 11th Parliament kick off what could be their last day in the House before the election, which is now just 53 days away. Good morning and thank you for joining us. I'm Hussein Mohammed, and as the Parliament adjourns today, concerns over pending business, among them county government spending for the next financial year that is now in limbo, as the Senate and National Assembly tussle over what amount should be released to counties for the next financial year. Also this morning,
Mr. Ezra Chiloba and the Director of Election Operations and Voter Registration, Immaculate Kasait, were the contacts for State House in the decision to award the tender and procedurally and illegally to Al Gohirair.
We didn't want to have a split tender where you have 3-4 companies printing ballot papers for elections in this country, because that is a recipe for rigging. It brings trouble. And we said, look, this is the only company which can give us this, and that's why we went for it. We considered all factors, considered all the companies which are available.
So all the more than 20 by-elections we've had, the printing has always been with Al Gohirair. No one has ever raised an issue over that matter. So he's only coming to the fore at this particular point, partly because of the general election.
now the opposition piles pressure on the IEBC, now demanding the cancellation of the ballot paper tender awarded to Al Gohirair, that is the Dubai printing firm, and calling for CEO Ezra Chiloba's resignation and investigation. Which way forward? In studio we're joined by electoral law expert Felix Odiambo, Danson Omari, and Gabriel Muduma, our political analyst. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. We'll be talking to you shortly. We'll also be live. Sam Gituk will be joining us from the IEBC headquarters. Of course, they've called for our consultative meeting with the candidates over this matter now. We'll also be live with Jackie Maribe, who's following the campaigns led by Jubilee, led by President Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto. Stephen Leto will be live in Kajiado, where the National Super Alliance will also be having a political rally. But we begin in Parliament, and several MPs could be accessing that building for the last day, as the 11th Parliament is hours away to adjourn for what could be its final break in this electoral cycle. Now, only 53 days now to the election, which many of the sitting MPs will contest to regain their seats. But what have been the highlights of the 11th Parliament, and what have been the successes and failures? Francis Gashuri is standing by in Parliament. Gashuri.
Hussein Mohammed, a very good morning to you. You can call it the closing day for the 11th Parliament, unless a special sitting of the National Assembly and the Senate is called, then many members of the National Assembly, as well as those in the Senate, could be accessing the chambers for the last time. Remember, quite a number of them lost in the nominations for various political parties that were conducted last month, and some are even vying as independent candidates. And remember, every other parliament there's a very high turnover rate, and so some of the members, I don't want to say how many, I don't even want to pinpoint who could be, but you can as well be sure, Hussein, that quite a number of the members of the National Assembly, as well as those in the Senate, could be bidding farewell to their time here in Parliament. And also remember, every time we have a general election as the one that we are heading to in August, some big names fall. It is not clear some of the big names that could likely fall in the general election, especially from Parliament. And so it's the closing day. It's the adjournment sine die, or indefinite adjournment of the National Assembly and the Senate. I remember for the last 1 month or so, the National Assembly as well as the Senate has seriously suffered quorum hitches, because quite a number of members of the two chambers of Parliament are busy out there campaigning, seeking re-election, and so business of the House has been affected because of the low turnout of the members. And so it was deemed wise to release the members of Parliament to go and campaign out there. However, remember, unlike previous dispensations where Parliament was dissolved, this time under this constitutional order, Parliament does not, or is not dissolved. Its term automatically ends on the eve of the general election. In this case, on the 7th of August 2017. And even as the members of the National Assembly and the Senate proceed on adjournment, indefinite adjournment, they can be recalled at any given time to come and transact critical or urgent business of the House that requires parliamentary approval. And even as they seek to exit for that adjournment, indefinite adjournment, there is quite a lot in the entry that remains unresolved. For example, a division of revenue bill is yet to be passed because of the standoff between the Senate and the National Assembly. The two chambers have since nominated members to the mediation panel, 4 members each from the Senate: Senator Bill Okero, Senator Beatrice Elachi, Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. and Senator Dr. Agnes Zani will be representing the Senate in the mediation panel. And from the National Assembly, the chairman of the Budget Committee, Honorable Mutava Musimi, his deputy, Mary Amase, the member of Parliament for Kitutu Chache, Richard Onyonka, as well as the member of Parliament for Luanda, Christopher Omulele, have been appointed to the mediation panel to try and find some middle ground, because the National Assembly is insisting that the county governments get 291 billion shillings. The senators have increased that amount to 314 billion shillings. So that is the standoff, and it has affected the passage of the finance bill that, as it were, gives the legal impetus to the division of revenue for the 2017-2018 financial year. So those are some of the issues that we'll be trying to deal with, Hussein, here. We'll also be trying to sample views from members of the National Assembly as well as those in the Senate to try and give us an idea of what they think the 11th Parliament has been able to achieve, the highs and lows of the 11th Parliament, and some of the things probably that they look forward to. And also remember some of the pending business that remains. For example, the passage of the Gender Principle Bill. Is it possible to pass it today by the time the House proceeds on indefinite adjournment? Highly unlikely, because for even that business to be transacted in the House, there has to be 233 members. And bearing in mind the quorum hitches that the House has been witnessing, it remains very highly unlikely that the Gender Principle Bill will be passed by the time the business of the House is transacted this evening and members proceed on indefinite adjournment. However, as I told you earlier, in case this consensus, the members can be recalled at any given time to come and transact that business. So Hussein, back to you for now, but definitely when we get another opportunity, we will be able to sample views from members of the Parliament to give us an idea about what they think have been the achievements and maybe the downfalls of the 11th Parliament. Back to you, Hussein.
Right, Gashuri, thank you so much, because there's still a lot more talk about all the issues, including the pending issues in Parliament. We'll be joining him shortly. Jackie Maribe now on her way to Kericho, because she's been following the Jubilee campaigns on the campaign trail with President Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto leading those campaigns. Jackie, what should we expect today?
Right, indeed, Hussein, as you're saying, when we say we are on the road on this campaign trail, we literally are on the road. As you can see, we are en route to Kericho County. The President and his deputy will be leading Jubilee members or leaders in a vote hunting mission there, where they will be touring the towns of Sigowet, Fort Tenan, Londiani, Mosetet, Sosiot, Roret, Kapsiot, Chepseon, Kericho Town, Chigorge, Litein, and Kapkatet. But this being a nationwide presidential campaign, we are hearing the issues that they are trying to sell to the electorate as they seek to add onto the vote basket that they have. They are, of course, keeping on with their development agenda, trying to sell their track record, saying that what they have done in the past 4 years should be enough for the electorate that they are endearing themselves to give them a second term to either complete it or just to basically work on new projects that they have been proposed everywhere that we have followed them on in the various counties, be it Bungoma, Busia yesterday, a lot of the Rift Valley, Elgeyo Marakwet, Nandi, West Pokot. We were able as well to go to Kisii, Nyamira, Nakuru, Nyandarua and Laikipia counties, and the message looks like it is basically the same. They are trying to endear themselves on their development agenda, but also taking a swipe at their opposition, their political competitors, who say, you know, time and again they are asking the electorate to put them on a weighing scale, asking them what exactly those in the opposition have done for them, even when they were in power collectively. And of course, we're saying at some point the ICC ghost came up, it read, it said again, and they're trying to tell the electorate that even when they campaigned in 2013, they still had the ICC noose hanging over their their head. They were able to clinch the victory. They are saying they can do it again. And issues to do with local politics, Hussein, as would be expected in every different county, have been cropping up. Yesterday in Busia County, there were issues to do with the appointment there, Babu Namwamba, the Budalangi legislator, who in Budalangi particularly and in Bumala, you could see some of those supporters, a section of the crowd really just jeering him and not giving him an opportunity to speak. He was able, however, to speak in his own home turf of Budalangi. But what we are seeing, Hussein, is there are a number of independent candidates who are affiliating themselves to Jubilee, and the message continues to be from them that they would still want to run as independents but be able to support the presidential bid. However, Hussein, there are local leaders who are not for that idea at all. Whether or not we will see that in Kericho, in Bomet tomorrow, and in Kakamega on Saturday is something that we will wait to see as the day pans out. Hussein.
Right, Jackie, before you go, because you talk about the campaign issues for Jubilee, one that is now being thrust into the campaigns is the issue about IEBC. What it means today, seeing you there and heading to Kericho, is that President Kenyatta will not be honoring the invite by IEBC to all presidential candidates today, that is the IEBC headquarters.
That's right, Hussein, and I just want to take you back to when there was that signing of the election pledge by IEBC. President Uhuru Kenyatta addressed the press here in Eldoret, where he basically was trying to say that even while he is on the campaign trail, he was committed to a free and fair election devoid of any violence. However, we do understand, yes, he will not be attending that, but we do understand that the IEBC had opened up that space to allow any representative of these presidential candidates to attend this particular meeting, and which we understand that is what exactly is going to happen. For now, they will continue on their vote hunting mission with just a few short 50 plus something days to go. Hussein.
All right, Jackie Maribe on her way to Kericho. Jackie will be talking to you later on Citizen Extra. Thank you for that. Right now, Stephen Leto joins us. He's in Kitengela, was in Kajiado County, en route to a NASA rally. Leto following the campaigns there. Leto, what should we expect today?
Well, a very good morning to you, Hussein Mohammed, there in studio. Like you've put it, we are on transit to Kajiado town, particularly Lodokilani section, whereby the National Super Alliance is taking its weekend political derby. This is where the National Super Alliance weekend political activities kicks off. And today they have scheduled a number of meetings in Kajiado County. For instance, at around midday, they will be at Lodokilani, where they will be hosted by Taraya Olekores, who is the Jubilee Party chairman for Kajiado County, who is expected to be defecting to the National Super Alliance today, alongside several other leaders in Kajiado County who have kicked the Jubilee ship, and now they are crossing over to NASA. And so those are what we are expecting today in Kajiado. And also NASA team has split itself into two. We are having another team crisscrossing the other side of Kajiado West, while another team will be on this side of Kajiado Central, the Lodokilani section, where they will be hosting their rally at Miley 46 grounds in around just after Kajiado town. And so a lot is expected today in the National Super Alliance activities, with another rally now ending their day or closing their day expected to take place in Rongai Nakil grounds, whereby all the National Super Alliance principals are expected to convene there for that particular rally. And so remember, the battle for the Maasai votes is ongoing. This is some of the votes that is being regarded as a swing vote, and so the National Super Alliance is trying to have themselves a foot ahead of their opponents, that is the Jubilee Party. Remember, a lot will be expected in those rallies, a lot that has been expecting in terms of what the National Super Alliance intends to lure the Maasai voters to their side in terms of what they will be telling them. Remember, the governor for this county is an ODM governor, and they are also expecting to take the woman representative position as well as the senatorial position, all in the Jubilee side for now. But now I hand you back to Studio Hussein, but we will be keeping you up to speed on what we will be expecting and happening here in Kajiado County.
All right, thank you so much. Stephen Leto will be also joining Stephen Leto later on Citizen Extra. For the opposition, National Super Alliance NASA now wants the ballot paper tender awarded to Dubai-based firm Al Ghurair cancelled, saying IEBC colluded with senior Jubilee officials, including members of President Kenyatta's family, to award the tender to Al Ghurair. NASA is also demanding the resignation and subsequent investigation of Commission CEO Ezra Chiloba and the Director of Voter Registration, Immaculate Kasait, for being part of what they say was a suspicious deal. The IEBC CEO and Chair have meanwhile defended the Commission. Let's take a look at what first NASA alleged.
Information in our possession indicates that the Chief Executive Officer of the IEBC, Mr. Ezra Chiloba, and the Director of Election Operations and Voter Registration, Immaculate Kasait, were the contacts for State House in the decision to award the tender and procedurally and illegally to Al Ghurair. We have established that President Kenyatta summoned the IEBC CEO to the State House meeting where Mr. Aziz was present as head of a Dubai business delegation. Mrs. Kasait, on her part, is clouded in numerous integrity issues. She reports on a weekly basis to the State House, where she gives status updates to the head of the Public Service and Chief of Staff, Joseph Kinyua. Mrs. Kasait is also a member of a Jubilee-leaning organization known as the Mount Kenya Foundation, which operates from the Parklands area. The activities of this foundation are shrouded in mystery. The offices of this organization is accessed only by President Kenyatta, Deputy President William Ruto, Mrs. Winnie Gushu, Cabinet Secretary Joseph Nkaiseri, businessman Chris Kirubi, former Cabinet Secretary Davis Chirchir, and former Chief of General Staff Joseph Karangi.
Oh, this is how IEBC responded.
Since 2014, yes, 2014-15, we've had several by-elections. We all know that. The largest by-election was in Homa Bay, the senatorial by-election. And where did we print our ballot papers? It was in Dubai. So all the more than 20 by-elections that we've had, the printing has always been with Al Ghurair. And no one has ever raised an issue over that matter. So it's only coming to the fore at this particular point, partly because of the general election. And as Chair said, the issue has never been about capacity. Even the competitors out there who know Al Ghurair, they don't question the capacity of Al Ghurair.
On the issue of the court cases, all the way up to the Court of Appeal, the main issue was whether, whether the commission was in place or not. And the findings of the court led to the fact that there was no commission in place at the time the contract with Al Ghurair was signed. It was not about the quality of the company, it was not about the capacity of the company, and we evaluated, looked at all factors, looked at the possibility of, looked for a company which can print all the 130 million ballot papers in one factory. And it's the only company we came up with which can do that process. We didn't want to have a split tender where you have 3-4 companies printing ballot papers for elections in this country, because that is a recipe for rigging, it brings trouble. And we said, look, this is the only company which can give us this, and that's why we went for it. We considered all factors, considered all the companies which are available.
Well, on the specific allegations of Chiloba going to State House, the CEO of IEBC responded to that, saying that was just political gossip. In studio now, Gabriel Muzuma is a political analyst, and Danson Omari, also a political analyst. Electoral law expert Felix Odembe also joins us. Thank you again, gentlemen, for making time for us. Felix, I'll start with you. What do you make of all this?
Wow, I mean, it's confusing, and I think it's a serious issue of concern, and one that cannot be wished away. As I was coming here this morning, I was remembering the words of the late George Saitoti, that there reaches a time when the state or the nation should be bigger than individuals. The truth of the matter is that in the whole issue of election management, there are two things that stand out comparatively across the world. Number one is the issue of integrity. Election is about integrity, and in this regard is the integrity of the process, integrity of the systems, and integrity of the personnel. Now, if you judge the IEBC against these three tests, I think the consensus is out there that they are yet to do a lot to secure the confidence of the Kenyan populace insofar as these tests are concerned. The other issue is about perception. And again, here there are three tests. One is that the perception as to their degree of autonomy, the perception as to the degree of their independence, and the perception as to the degree of service delivery. And again, the jury is out there as to whether the IEBC is been able to meet these three tests. Although this situation compares with what happened in South Africa in the year 2014 that involved the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa, where the then chairperson, Pansy, was involved in an integrity issue. And the allegation was that during the procurement of the premises that the IEC of South Africa sits in Centurion in Johannesburg, Pansy was involved with the company that ended up getting this tender. The question as South Africa was going for that election was whether her integrity was tainted as to have a direct linkage with the credibility and the outcome of that process. In South Africa, the consensus was that despite that integrity issue, the chairperson of South Africa, Pansy, had that integrity issue did not touch in a capacity to deliver a credible process or in a capacity to manage the elections fairly. And this was unanimous, including by people like Julius Malema. Now, the difference with South African Independent Electoral Commission and Kenya is that in Kenya, every integrity issue that is mentioned has direct bearing and linkage on the outcome of the elections. As a way forward, I think, and I've listened to the arguments of both the CEO and the chair. Now, the argument is that, look, we've worked with this company ever since. They have the capacity. Even Thomas De La Rue would be able to print these ballot papers if he wanted to go that route and if he wanted to go that argument. The CEO of the IEBC should know that the tenders with regard to the printing of ballots in the by-election is very different with this tender. And so to the extent that these issues have been raised and the concerns that they have about the time constraints and things like that, I think as a way forward and as a middle ground, the country should consider giving Al Burai the tenders to print the ballots for every other elective office, but the IEBC should tender afresh for the printing of the presidential ballots, because I think this is where the issue is. Time constraint it does not arise because in 2013 we printed the ballots in February and the elections were held in March. We have 53 days to go. And quite recently, when Theresa May of the UK called for a snap elections, 3 weeks later they were able to print the ballots and hold the special general election, and they were able to hold the elections.
Thank you, Hussein. I think, first of all, let me agree to a very high extent with what my colleague is saying. The issue, I think, that is being raised is not an issue of capacity. And just listening to both the chairman and the CEO of IEBC, I think they need to understand what NASA, the issue NASA actually is raising. It is not, or it has very little to do with the capacity that the Dubai-based company Al Ghurair has. I don't think that is how has been put into question. What people are questioning is the credibility of the process. Now, Hussein, we started out by saying that the issue when it comes to a presidential election and that of a by-election, like my colleague has said, those are two different animals. The issue that we are fighting today and what IEBC must take note of is the presidential election. That is what everybody is looking out for. So it needs to be looked into with a lot of seriousness in it, not to just come and give examples of how a by-election was run. This is a presidential election. It needs a lot. Now, we talked about the credibility of the process from a long time ago, where we were talking about minimum reforms. We've had 10 years to inject maximum reforms, and today we've been caught into another quagmire of a situation whereby we have done very little. This is not just for IBC, but also the political players and other key stakeholders of our process. We have waited until we are now time barred. There's very little that can be done. I mean, we've seen IBC firing two senior people in very senior ranks in IBC, which also does not give the key players. And in this, really let it be said, I know there are so many independent candidates, but the two key players are the NASA coalition and the Jubilee coalition. It does not actually give a good platform when you have senior people leaving or exiting IEBC at this point. So the question that everybody is asking is IEBC ready? And this question will come up time and time again until we head into the election. So the other thing that they may look, I mean, we are running back and forth in court cases. So we are looking at, we are all agreeing it's time bad, but still we have so many people who are readying themselves to run into court to just create what I would call a constitutional crisis in this nation. So as we sit back, Hussein, we need to ask, the Kenyan voter must now start asking, what is in store for them in terms of what will be in terms of what will come out, given that Jubilee and NASA are not seeing eye to eye with what is happening in IBC. I think we are not heading in the right direction. IBC has tried all they can to tell us that they'll try as much as possible to run a credible election, but there are no key indicators as to how that will happen, Hussein.
Okay, that's fine. I look at it, Hussein, in two ways. One, politically speaking, I see the IBC, the Constitution put it very clearly that the chair of the IBC must be somebody who is a lawyer and who has over 15 years in practice to be an equivalent of a judge. The reason is that the IBC sits as if it is a high court of this country. Every decision the IBC takes is a judicious decision. But within that decision-making framework, they need to understand that they are making decisions that are political in a very toxic environment, in an environment that is very suspicious, and in a country where NASA controls either 50.01% of the population or 49.9%. Jubilee either controls 50.01% or 49.99%. So this is a country that is a hung country. So any decision that is being made from the IBC is normally looked from a propaganda machine. Did the IBC, when they awarded this decision, anticipate the reaction of NASA? They didn't. They have been caught their pants down. The same way, for example, the propaganda machine that was unleashed on Governor Kabogo, he lost very fast. Before he could even regroup himself, he was seen as an anti-women person. The same scenario that Mandago rallied the people of Uasin-Gishu that Buseki is a project of William Ruto. But within a minute, the situation has changed. What has happened to the IBC politically? You've seen they have called 8 presidential candidates to go to a meeting today. Sarcastically and in a manner that is comical, they are saying that they want those candidates to go to Dubai to observe the printing of the papers. Which
representatives of
which really tells you that the IBC does not understand the politics of the day. Let me look at legally what we are dealing with. Al-Burai tender was the subject of a court case. One, at the procurement tribunal. Two, at the High Court. free at the Court of Appeal. And all those cases, IBC lost. Al-Murai lost. What is that politically in terms of perception? The perception has been built that that company has credibility questions. It might be true, as the chairman is saying, that the questions before the court was whether there was a proper commission to contract that contract. One Chiloba purported himself to be the commissioner and signed the contracts. He is the same person who has been seen in State House.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. He has not denied.
He has denied.
No. He has not denied. He only said. That denial for a lawyer is not a denial. He could have gone to court.
It depends on how you interpret it, but he said, when he was asked that question, he said, I mean, that is just political gossip.
That is a serious defamation question. You could have rushed to court today. Then we will know that that is not a political denial. So Hussein, what we are looking at is a question, as my good friend tells me, the question of perception. The standard of integrity for an IBC is similar to what in law we call the Caesar's wife's test, beyond reproach. That justice must be done, but it must also be seen to be done. So when there are integrity issues that the big guys of IBC were seen at State House.
So what does this do to the election then?
Then that is the dilemma.
What does this do? What do you think does to the election?
Hussein, I'll tell you for free, today I'm very definite that NASA will be heading to court on the question of bias and conflict of interest, and definitely the courts are going to stop that tender. The IBC, and I'm sure they're watching this live, should just cancel that tender, because it was not a tendering process, it was a direct procurement. And under direct procurement, give another person that tender today and avoid all these skirmishes. If they try to insist, the way they have insisted on legal arguments, even the question of where should the results be announced, the IBC is totally misguided by the commercial wing of the legal department within the IBC that wants the IBC every other time to be sued, so that that commercial wing generates taxpayers' money in terms of legal fees. This country, as my good friend puts it, is bigger than Chebukati. I see a very innocent but naive chairman who has not understood the political terrain of this country and the propaganda machine that NASA has assembled. In 2013, propaganda took Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto to State House. In 2017, NASA's propaganda machine cannot be compared with Jubilee, and now it has.
So this could just be propaganda?
It is serious propaganda.
Against IBC?
Against IBC, and they are not prepared on how to handle that.
Should they be prepared on how to handle that? Should they be part of such? Let me get Phillips to respond to this. Because what Dunstan is talking about is this could be propaganda. That's what you're saying, Dunstan. Meaning it could be truth, or it could just be propaganda, isn't it?
Yes.
So if it is propaganda, if it's not the truth, should IBC be worried about this? Should the country be worried about this going into the election, or should they just forget about it, go ahead, get the ballot papers printed, and the election should happen?
In my own view, the IBC should be more worried, because that propaganda has turned to be the truth. In politics, when a lie is repeated a million times, it becomes the truth, and that is likely to spark war.
Okay, let me get
the consequences of a propaganda is that it might make people take a position which might not be based on any sound position, and it's very dangerous for the security of this nation.
Let me get Felix to respond to what I was asking. Felix, yeah.
Well, I agree largely with what Dunstan has said. And let me emphasize this point. Even as we make we take this position, we are doing this with the best of intention, for the love of this country, and there is absolutely nothing personal or nothing malicious about it. I don't, however, think that the question with regard to this procurement, the problems with the procurement is a propaganda issue. I think there are fundamental truths about it. There are serious comparison and similarities with the 2013
we are in fact reliving the 2013 electoral environment once more, where IEBC was faced with similar problems with regard to the procurement, some of which actually ended up in complete disarray, and serious integrity issues were raised with regard to those procurement. And as I've said, in this country, if the IEBC's involvement or integrity issues raised against IEBC on matters of procurement have direct linkage with the outcome of the election. Now, this is a point that we should not lose. Why am I saying this is not a propaganda? We're saying in the best practices of election management, procurement of the ballot papers comes at the tail end of the electoral cycle. It happens when nominations are done, so that IEBC can have a projection of the number of candidates who will contest that elections. Look at our situation. After the nomination, we've now realized that we have more independent candidates than even candidates sponsored by political parties. This fact would not have established itself last year. When did IEBC procure or flout the tender for procurement of ballot papers? In October of last year. This tender was awarded in October. The biggest question was, or the biggest question is, why did IEBC rush to make this procurement, knowing very well that this is really the last procurement that comes during the electoral cycle? Secondly, there are fundamental issues of conflict of interest that have been raised. There are fundamental issues of unhealthy business relationship between the IEBC on one part and between the top leadership of this country. Now, these are issues that cannot be wished away. I've participated in elections since '97, and in 2002, 2007, and 2013 was involved very closely with the election management body and was involved at the National Tallying Center, the so-called National Tallying Center. And one thing that I've realized, every allegation or rumor that has been made with regard to election management in this country has come to pass. And so we cannot wish this away. And finally, Ezra Chiloba was given an opportunity to refute and rebut whether it was actually at State House. In fact, what it did, what Americans call pivoting. It was asked, did you receive instructions from State House? And then he flipped it and said, oh, that should not be the question. The question should be, was I at State House in the first place? And I think that is pivoting. So it's not propaganda.
You see, to an extent, you can read a lot of allegations. In fact, but the allegations are quite powerful. Not only that, they can actually be, there could be innuendos, they could be actually rubbished or wrapped very well within the framework of what you would call propaganda, which is actually what I would call an attempt to actually bring out key institution failures by IEBC. Now, IEBC, from where I'm seated, probably they cannot run away from the fact that there are serious impediments that they've been trying to work through. I mean, these are people who've been hired just the other day. They came in, you saw the Hassan-led commission when it left. There was some element of argument. People are asking, will they hit the ground running? Will they be able to run the August election? And when they came in, they're like, yes, we still have ample time. There are ways we need to do it. But if we get goodwill, if we have goodwill, and this is what they said, if we have goodwill from the principal players, then I believe this election will take place. And I think so far that has been the side we are taking. But Hussein, we cannot also run away from what Bwana Omar is calling as mere propaganda. This is a deliberate attempt to emphasize that IEBC are working in cahoots with the Jubilee administration. And for you to pull this stunt, it's actually very easy. You just hype it up and people will start believing it. It has happened in the past, it will happen again. But what we must learn as a voter, personally myself, is that both NASA and Jubilee owe Kenyans one thing. They owe Kenyans a peaceful political environment, and also they owe Kenyans what we call a peaceful transition should anything happen. That must suffice. But if you look at the word propaganda and what we are saying, Ezra is coming, I tried to answer a question where he was asked where he was answering and saying that they have worked in the past with the Dubai-based commission. And as my colleague said, that is not what is being asked. What is being asked, is there an element of credibility? Because several people have been mentioned. Are they working in cahoots? As much as he will not come out and say or call it whether it's fact or propaganda, people will start believing what NASA is saying. And if NASA carries the song, very few Kenyans will be able to decipher whether this is propaganda or is truth. That is just how we are wired, Hussein. So we go back to the basics. Do we have a problem at IBC? As much as they are trying to say that they'll have a credibility process, whether they are, as much as they are trying to say the exercise will be credible, there is still the underlying factor that people are going to read that there is an issue between, or there is some element of friendliness between IEBC and Jubilee. But Hussein, there's something that we also must answer, and a question that must be asked by the many Kenyans of goodwill. Is the ballot paper, is it just that? Because we started by saying we have so many areas where these ballot papers can be printed. So if they are going to be printed, and if we repeat this process, does that make it okay? Are we so sure now that the process will be credible? I still tell you no. For once, NAFTA, they've had an issue with all the processes that IBC have tried to implement, starting with the BVRs, coming to the voter identification devices. There has been an issue, there has been a question all along. So we are talking about a general credibility of the entire process. If you ask me, if it was a credible process, it does not matter who prints the ballot papers, because if the person who comes out to vote is assured of a one man, one vote, we should not care who prints the ballot papers. The deputy president the other day, I think he made fun and he was making a joke by saying, you know what, if these tallies give this project or give this assignment or procurement, give it to a company or that's associated with the prime minister. So if you are looking at the process of one man, one vote, then I think it does not matter who will print the ballot papers.
Okay, there's a question here that I want to ask to all of you.
Yes.
This is an allegation made by the National Super Alliance.
Yes.
The onus is on the National Super Alliance to prove what they're saying, isn't it?
Yes, true.
Isn't that the case? Yes. So if that is the case, an IBC definitely does not operate in a vacuum. There's politics in this country, there are campaigns going on in this country. Whether the allegation is coming from NASA or Jubilee or whichever other party or whichever other person, should they be ascertained first, or should IBC now be looked at that like they're not credible?
Hussein, let me answer that very quickly before my colleagues do that. I think for starters, and Dunstan will agree with me on this, when you're issuing an allegation, you do not need to defend it. This is Kenya. All it needs to do is put you on an even foot by saying Dunstan is a thief. I don't need, actually, there's no machinery for me or somebody to hold me a gun to my head and say, Gabriel, prove that Dunstan is a thief. I don't need to. What will happen in this case is Dunstan for himself to come and actually try to clear his name. That is just the price of our instrument. It's not the right thing, and I think it's a bad thing for us to be in such a situation. But when somebody crisscrosses an allegation, like Musalia Mudavadi did in NASA, he does not, nobody will force him to prove those allegations, and that is the problem we are facing, Hussein.
Well, Hussein,
so where does that leave us then? I mean,
Hussein, my take is this.
Yeah.
This country has its own ways of dealing with political culture. And the political culture of this nation is grounded on the concept that there is a perception, which I said, the half-half division of this country. And in between, at 50 point, is the IBC. How does it balance such a situation? When political machinery called propaganda is released on any government or international institution who's saying that institution must cave in. In the case of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto at the ICC, the political machinery and propaganda was unleashed. An international criminal court caved in and said, guys, go back to Kenya, don't disturb us here. The same scenario, we saw the former commissioner of the IBC, Ahmed Isaac, insisting that they will never go away. When the political machinery was released by the then court, they are at home now. The same weapon has been declared that they are going to release it by NASA. It is incumbent upon the IBC not to seek for evidence, because this is not a court of law. This is the public court. What do they do? This is a serious allegation, yes. And I'm sure you'll all agree, including Felix, with your expertise in this. Yes. This is a very serious allegation. 53 days to the election. Yes. So what does it mean? Even if IBC decides to do another tender and get somebody else to print the ballot papers, they have already been associated with the president. So isn't there still going to be a credibility issue here?
I mean, not necessarily, Hussein. And I'll give you 4 specific examples. But before I give you that, I was involved in observing the elections in France some times back, not this last election, but the ones before it, where upon completion of voting and the time had gone, people decided that the returning officer should carry all the election materials, including ballot papers, put in his boot, and then go with it to his house and come back tomorrow so that that process can be continued. The people and the electorates in that particular polling station accepted it. Why? Because the perception of credibility and independence and autonomy of the Electoral Commission in France was above reproach. In the last election in America, that Donald Trump won, unfortunately, is not the best of examples. There are a number of polling stations where ballot papers, the stations ran out of ballot papers. What happened is, the presiding officers in those particular polling stations simply went to the other room and printed ballot papers. And the electorate in America understood and accepted. They have confidence in the Electoral Commission, and the perception is right out there and things like that. The fact, if we bring that home in Kenya, and by the way, I would cite the Ghanaian Electoral Commission as well. In this continent, it is only Ghana that has had the closest and the most competitive election, and that was in 2008, where the difference between the New Patriotic Party, the current president, Nana Akufo-Addo, and Jonathan Mills, who was in the opposition then, was 23,000 votes. The electorates in Ghana accepted the verdict and the outcome of that elections and did not second-guess the Electoral Commission of Ghana. The test that I've asked my colleagues and friends at IBC, if this country, and we are, by the way, 2017 is probably the closest election that we've ever had in this country. The test is, would IBC survive a situation where the difference between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga would be 23,000 votes? I think the jury is out there to deliberate on that. But let us go back and look at the trends and the examples. Number one is that IBC has been faced with the 2 major procurements. The procurements of KIMS and the procurement of ballot papers. The question is, how did IBC go about this decision? Look at in the procurement of KIMS, for example, that was probably, as affirmed by the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board, was that was the most transparent and accountable process, where all the companies went through that process, and by the way, there was no challenge. The board actually gave that tender to the company that had survived and gone through the entire technical evaluation. What did IBC do? Instead of moving ahead with that procurement, they in fact nullified it, gave it to Safran Mofo, and said that we have a long history of working together with Safran Mofo. Before that, when the Joint Bipartisan Committee of Kiraitu and Orengo passed the amendment to the Elections Act, they actually came up with a specification on the technology that this country should use, and that is how we ended with what is called the integrated technology. What happened subsequent to that? Instead of IBC looking ways to implement that, the IBC actually moved the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee and said that Parliament has passed this, but we don't think we have the time to implement it. Now, this is the conduct against which we are judging IBC on its own actions. And then, of course, the question of Al Ghurair. Yesterday in the Star, a front headline,
and the chronology of events that culminated into the award of Al Ghurair that tender, including the CEO of Al Ghurair coming here and holding strategic meetings with the leadership of the country.
The Jubilee leadership.
The Jubilee leadership. That is a fundamental issue of conflict of interest, as was upheld in the South African case that I told you about. But it is not just that. In October last year, the board nullified the tendering process, and then subsequent to that, Judge Odunga also nullified the tendering process. And Chebukati is economical with the truth. He's claiming that the ground for that nullification was because the commission was not there. Far from it. The grounds for nullification was the irregularity that was cited in that tendering process. In April, IBC had a chance, an opportunity to start that process again when the board when Judge Odunga nullified that process. What did they do? They actually waited until May and then opted to single source. When an opportunity came before the board again nullified that process, citing irregularities, but gave them a lifeline to go with the best convenient route. And in fact, with the benefit of hindsight, I think they gave them a lifeline to again contract Al Ghurair. So Hussein, if you look at the conduct of IBC over this since last year, and with these specific examples in mind, the onus is not on the opposition to prove this. IBC should be judged on their own conduct and how they have steered this process thus far.
That is as far as the legal processes that you have enumerated there are concerned. Here we're talking about a direct allegation that tender now was given to Al Ghurair, was awarded to Al Ghurair because of senior officials from Jubilee, including members of Kenyatta's family, and that is what I'm asking. Should that be substantiated? Because if you're saying it doesn't matter, it's about perception, fine. If the tender is cancelled and another tender is issued, and somebody else, whether it is NASA or whoever, comes about and says something fresh, are you going to say the process will be stopped again and something else is done because we don't have time to ascertain or prove anything? It's about perception.
I was saying, when you interviewed the CEO here yesterday, Ezra Chiloba, the body language and the verbal language, that was a man who was very evasive. He never answered your questions directly that you asked. You were asking on behalf of the citizens of this country. Number two, serious allegations have raised that touch on the family of the candidate for Jubilee. One, President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Three, the perception being created, as I said, by NASA, is that the candidate for Jubilee is part and parcel of Al Ghurair. It is not a legal question, and this is what I'm telling the citizens, that there are two types of courts. There is the public court that has taken the NASA narrative 100% to be the truth, and those are the voters. The NASA brigade, as I was leaving court to come here, they are likely to file a substantive case in court. And my advice to the way forward is so simple. Let not IBC wait for the legal battles to prove the allegations or not disprove those allegations. For the sake of this nation, and you told me, you remembered the late George Saitoti is what? Okay, there's a time the country is bigger, and it's so simple. Let the IBC, in that meeting that they're having today, tell the people that now that we are in this quagmire, how do we go forward? And once we agree how do we go forward, they nullify that tender. A company that is agreeable to the two formations and to the IBC and the value for money for the taxpayers of this nation is awarded that tender today. It is a direct contract. They already have the people who have been bidding this process, and the conduct of the IBC is very clear. They are not interested to conduct a truly fair, transparent and verifiable election. Let them not take this country to the dogs.
Okay, and if you want a middle ground, Hussein, if you want a middle ground from what Dunstan has said, there is a middle ground that can
if the fear is about time constraints and going to court and prolonging this process, then the middle ground that I would advocate for is the understanding that the dispute with regard to these tenders is largely with respect to the presidential ballots. I don't think there is a contest with regard to the other ballot papers for the other elective offices. So what then should they do? I hope that in the meeting that they are going to have today, they can go for that middle ground where they say, okay, Al-Ghurair have this. If the IBC is concerned is with regard to time, print the ballot papers for other elective offices. But for the sake of the presidential ballots, we are going to give it to a different company. And it should be clean. Hussein, very quickly, let me just add something to what my colleague has said. I still don't think, and I still honestly don't believe, that printing the ballot papers will set the course straight. Unless you want to assure everybody that this is the last hurdle we are facing, that once we get the printing papers, we can actually print them from the most secure place in the world. But will that make everything all right? Will now that give IBC the clearance and the goodwill that they want? You see, you started out by asking whether these allegations should be substantiated. Yeah. And Hussein, to be honest and to be fair to both IBC and maybe the Jubilee government, they also would need to come out clear and explain themselves. But you see, that is not like my good friend Omar is saying. That is probably not what the NASA enthusiasts want to hear. They've already taken sides. They've already believed. So it does not matter what you do. The anomalies that we have, and I'm repeating it again, that we have in this country, Hussein, is that we have built an infrastructure whereby IBC, no matter what they do, we don't have an avenue where an election can actually be won fair. People will always say, you know what, nobody can be defeated if the primaries are anything to go by. That's why we have many independent candidates. Everybody will tell you something was done. I mean, I wasn't defeated fairly. It was stolen from me. So we do not have that ionas of calling an electoral process, whether a primary or what we are going to have in August 8th, as what you would term a fair process. Somebody will come up and say, you know what, I was defeated, this is what happened, I lost unfairly, and it will continue as long as we continue to have institutional failures. I repeat, I finish by asking you again, if we go out, and probably I would like my two good senior council members to answer this, if we get the ballot papers, is this the final frontier that IBC will be facing? That's what I was asking. I highly doubt. That's what I was asking, and I'm going to ask it in another way again. Okay. If we go through this hurdle, right, and Dunstan Omari, who is vying for a certain seat, for instance, yes, wakes up one morning and says IBC is doing this tender for technology, but that tender they have been doing it together with candidate ABCD's family and blah blah blah. Does that mean now we stop that? No need to ascertain anything? That process should stop. Let's start over again.
What happens, as I said, the IBC is deciding matters as if it's a court. There is always the application for a judge to remove himself, to recuse himself when there is a question of integrity by perception, not by evidence. The IBC is failing on only one issue, and Gabriel and Hussein, I'll tell you, this is not that the last problem. The IBC has been operating in an opaque manner. The IBC is still in that primary school principal's approach of giving directives, not involving the stakeholders actively. For example, the IBC has locked out the media in their preparation. If the media was part and parcel of the journey and it comes out to the public what they are doing, then we could not be having this. The IBC is purely fighting fires. Okay. Every time things go wrong.
Back to my question. Yes. What I'm asking, and any one of you can chip in now, because of time. What I'm asking is, what precedence would this set if Kenya decides to do something about this, to change or to get another, to award another tender to another company without ascertaining whether what is being said is fact or not? What precedent will it set?
My final word is that is the question about what are the consequences of insisting that this tender is above board. Are we ready to carry the consequence, which are similar to 2007? So because of that, we will have to have situational reality that this allegation can cause bloodshed. Let us avoid it. The truth, if we go looking for the truth and standing firm that this is the truth, the consequences, no Kenyan is ready to face it.
Hussein, if your question is, and I'm not sure whether I understood you correct, but if your question is, okay, or let me put it this way, I've interpreted it to mean, if we nullify this ballot tender, is it the only thing that we need to secure a credible process in 2017? Number two, is there any evidence to support the claim that was made yesterday?
Regardless of all the questions that have been raised about the tender,
yes,
going to the High Court, going to the Appeals Court, and the Review Board, the Review Board and what they ruled. My question is, when anyone in the electoral process decides to make an allegation against IEBC, which could be true or false, the question is, should that be ascertained, whether it is true or false, before a decision is made, or is it about just perception and we forget about it and we change something because a certain person or political party or coalition has said something?
Well, let me answer it this way. Every allegation that is made against IEBC, and as much as possible, and to comply and to have fidelity with the law, as much as possible, IEBC should not be accused wrongly. And the point that I'm stressing here is this. In this country, every allegation that has been made against an electoral commission, from the ECK to the IIEC to its successor commission, IEBC Ahmedzak and IEBC Chebukati, they've come to pass. Let us not forget this important point, because this is part and parcel of our history. Secondly, the only time this country ever moved closest to a civil war was as a result of the conduct of the election management body. Now, this should worry especially the people who are bestowed with the privilege of managing elections in this country, that they not only should safeguard against that experience, but also should remember the fundamental fact that in our 2010 Constitution, Article 1 talks elaborately about sovereignty. It has given power to the people. Now, the only way to exercise the sovereign power is through elections, and the body that is charged to spearhead and facilitate that process is the IEBC. The IEBC is therefore elevated over and above every other constitutional commission in this country. The truth of the matter is this: if an allegation has been made, and let us take this Al Ghurair for instance, there was an incontrovertible fact or evidence that has not been disputed up to now, that Al Ghurair actually reached out to the leadership of this country. It is in their website apparently, and it was pulled out by the Star yesterday at his front page. I don't know any other evidence that we need to know that this may have potentially taint the process. Second, and finally, what do we need to do as a country to secure a credible process? And I say this, I'm one of the people who had the rare opportunity of doing an LLM thesis research on reforming election management and electoral process in this country. And there are three things that we need to do. One is on voter registration. If we get that right, our elections will substantially improve. Secondly, given the problems that we face with over-balloting and staffing and things like that, we need technology that works, and especially the electronic voter identification device and the results transmission system. And finally is the ballot papers, the procurement of the ballot papers. This is not just a political issue or a propaganda issue. In 2000, the election that in Nigeria, the election that elected in 2009, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua to succeed Obasanjo, there was an allegation that was later established after the election that the ruling party, it was a South Africa, I think Lythotech of South Africa, that printed the ballots for Nigeria. The ruling party actually printed for the presidential ballot the exact number of ballot papers that had been commissioned, commissioned for this company to print in South Africa. It was established, it was found out. Allegations should be established, but if you look at our experience, judge IEBC solely for its conduct, and the conduct speaks for itself.
Okay.
Hussein, I think I'll finalize by saying I think it's actually making a very simple matter complex. And when you talk about the simplicity of just going to vote, the technology, yes, we have the technology which is supposed to make things easier and actually give some element of credibility, but still, without goodwill, nothing will actually take shape as we would want it to be. I told you, we have an electoral process that has been perceived as not able to produce defeat, and that is what we've actually taken upon ourselves. The two factions that exist today, Jubilee and ASA, most of their supporters and their enthusiasts believe of that very same. When you talk about people substantiating allegations, it's not going to happen, Hussein, because when somebody speaks to their supporters and to their fans and people who are so caught within that party, they will always believe what comes out from their party leaders. So we come back and question as much as we want the electoral process that is going on in this country, but we'll still not find an answer. Somebody said we need, like my good friend has said actually, we need to incorporate several things, machinery here and there. He's told us the fact that he has done a paper in regards to reforms. But I want to ask you a question. When Johansen Kriegler left us with a blueprint, him very well knowing that it was because of an electoral process that almost brought this country to a brink of civil strife. Can you tell me why 10 years later, removed from 2007, we have not done the required reforms into electoral process? I tell you, we have precipitated ourselves. It is us who have actually created this scenario, and we are heading to August 8th, fully well knowing that if we do not take care of what happened in 2007, this one will actually be worse. So I go back to the issue of us talking about a process whereby we are sitting down to align ourselves with a formula of having this country transition itself into a peaceful manner. And very few people will sit down and agree and say that there will be a clear winner in this election come August 8th. We are going to see a lot of defeatism, Hussein, coming out. We are going to see a lot of negative accusations that we are seeing right now. And you'll agree with me. And it's not building the hope that we want. And that's why I think moving forward we need to involve a lot of people in this process. And these a lot of people, I would actually want to hear what the religious leaders in this country want or what part they are going to play in this process. Okay.
Before you go, let's cross over to Sam Gitu, who is joining us live on phone now. Sam is at Intercontinental Hotel in Nairobi, where IBC is meeting presidential candidates, Sam, or their representatives. Who exactly are they meeting there, and who was shown up for the meeting?
Well, good morning, Hussein. So far, we have seen the IBC commissioners led by the chairman of Fule Chebukati and some 5 commissioners that he works with. And also, you've seen different presidential candidates. For instance, the independent candidate, Professor Michael Wainaina. We've seen the candidate for Third Way Alliance, Ekuru Aukot. And also, we've seen Raphael Tuji representing the Jubilee candidate, President Uhuru Kenyatta. And then just some other officials who have arrived here. And basically, the agenda here is to talk about what you've been talking about for the past few minutes. That is through the ballot papers tender to Al Ghurair company. And so I had spoken to one of the commissioners, Commissioner Rosalind Kwamboka, asking her what the main idea will be. And essentially what they're saying is that they'll be trying to convince these presidential candidates, the 8 of them, all their representatives, to convince them that everything has been done to ensure that the tender that was awarded to that firm is above board, and also just to quell and silence the claims that have been coming, and especially from the National Super Alliance. And also I was able to get some information from her. She says that in as far as that ballot is concerned, or rather that ballot paper tender is concerned, they identified that firm not because of the accusations that the National Super Alliance was saying there was some relationship with State House, saying that they will be trying to get to convince them against such accusation. Also, they're also planning, as you are well aware, that they are planning for a trip to Dubai for the presidential candidates, all their representatives, and also some stakeholders to go and see how the process is being undertaken. So she says that she'll also be flying out, of course, to be working that to see what can be done. And so as to whether there will be that trip, it is dependent on this meeting, Hussein, as the presidential candidates get to discuss with the commissioners on how soon they can be in a position to travel and whether they will be agreeable, Hussein.
Sam, I may not have got you clearly. Is there any representation from the National Super Alliance at that meeting?
Well, so far I've not seen a representative from the National Super Alliance, but I'll be going up to where the meeting is happening to identify if there is anyone, or rather to establish whether there is anyone who has come through. But so far, the people that you've seen is the representation from the Jubilee Party, the candidate for Third Way Alliance, and also the candidate who is an independent, Professor Michael Wenaina. But of course, I'll be trying to see whether there are other faces that may be linked to the other political parties. But so far, that's what we've seen.
Okay. And finally, when you're speaking to Commissioner Kwamboka, was there any indication from her, or was she certain or not, as to whether this process will go on, the printing of ballot papers by Al Ghurair?
Well, the idea here is that the train has left the station, so it's just about building consensus, or rather building confidence among the presidential candidates or the representatives and the political parties that are involved here. But essentially, they don't have much of time to really get to renegotiate and see if that can be reissued. So as far as IEBC is concerned, then that process has already started, and what they will be doing is to review, or rather to go and see how the process is happening, and also to see if really the political parties that are raising claims can be satisfied with what is happening.
Okay, Sam, thank you so much. Stay with us. We'll be talking to you shortly. I'll take a final round of comments here from my guests, but before that, I'll read a few texts here. One is from Hussein in Wajir, says, now that the claim was made, will cancellation and retendering clear and redeem the image of IBC? That is what he was asking. That is what even Mutuma was talking about. We also have somebody here from Joseph Arunga, who says, with due respect to Kenyan authorities, we must put aside anything that is suspect of the general election that will leave the electorate injured. Jubilee seems to speak more for IBC, as although it was the same body, one can only read along the lines, or through the lines. It is easy to correct that abnormality. That's what he says. And we have Salome in Kayole, who says, good morning, I support NASA. Yes, but Hussein, these people, I think talking about NASA, are becoming a problem to us. When they complained about IBC, the government changed it. Now every day they are complaining. When will we move now? Will they still, when we move now, will they still complain after they get into power? Imagine NASA, tunawapenda but mnaanza kutuchosha with complaints every day about IBC. So varied comments on 2244, but keep talking to us, 2244. You can text us on Twitter. You can use the hashtag #CitizenExtra. So to my panelists, finally, you've heard what Sam Gitoko is talking about. IBC talked about that yesterday. The indication is that they're not going to stop Al Ghurair from printing this ballot papers. This will go on. So how should this be resolved finally? Well, I mean, in both ways, whether it should be stopped, and if it should be stopped, what should be done. But if IBC insists on going on with the process, is there a way they can go on with the process and bring everyone on board and there's an agreement? I'll start with you, Felix.
In terms of way forward, I'll repeat what I've said. Let's look for a middle ground. Middle ground that accommodates IBC's resolve to go ahead with Al Ghurair. The point is, this has been their position since last year. And middle ground that accommodates the interest of court. And that middle ground, in my opinion, is actually to let Al Ghurair continue with printing the ballots of other elective offices, and then tender afresh the printing of the presidential ballot papers. We will save on time, and as I indicated in 2013 elections, we printed ballot papers literally 3 weeks of the general election in February, and elections were held on March the 4th. I think if you listen to the arguments of especially the IBC, and with all due respect to the chair of the IBC, I think he's a good man, but is innocently naive to imagine that he thinks somehow that if an electoral irregularity is spotted, because he means well, somebody will inform him that this irregularity is being committed. And let me remind the chair with all due respect, in this country there was nobody who knew elections than Samuel Kivuitu. At the height of 2007 elections, Kivuitu lamented publicly that I have absolutely no idea where my presiding and returning officers are. And later he actually admitted that he had no clue who won the elections. Mr. Chebukati, you will not see or spot these irregularities. They will be committed under your nose and you won't spot them. All the way the electoral process and election laws are constructed all over the world, the way the law works, is that the election management body are denied discretion in the electoral process. That is why even in petitions or election petitions or election litigation, the consistency and compliance is with the text of the law and not the discretion that the election management body should have. The middle ground, let me repeat, is for us to go to give the presidential ballots to another company.
Okay, Danson. My last word is this, that I'm very definite from the body language of NASA and from the body language of the IBC, NASA will not attend that meeting at Intercontinental. The reason is that NASA is politically agitating for their rights. The IBC is legally prosecuting their case. The two are different in one battle. Number three, when you see Raphael Tuchu there, politically speaking, Jubilee is being lumped to be part and parcel of the Al-Ghurair issue, even in the wisdom of the IBC. And my good Felix friend has given them that in this matter, it is the wisdom of the IBC that they stagger this type of contract. Other part, the 5 positions can be done by Al-Ghurair. The serious question about the presidential debate, who is going to do the ballot papers, be agreed upon by the IBC in a meeting with NASA and in a meeting with Uhuru Kenyatta's party of Jubilee. Failure to that, Hussein, you are going to start covering mass action within a very short time. It is heading to that direction. If NASA fails to appear in court today, then you are likely to hear people invoking Article 37 of the Constitution, and that will be a new rallying point to make NASA more popular or more unpopular. So if we are not careful as a nation, those street fights are coming back. My appeal to every citizen of this country is one: if NASA really is doing this for their selfish interest, it is a very serious affront to the democracy of institutions and the independence of institutions, and that could be a recipe for bloodshed and civil strife in this nation. Let every word that comes out from the two leadership of the two formations take into consideration the welfare of 42 million Kenyans or 45 million Kenyans in this country. A repeat of 2007 is not acceptable, not in this era when we have a history behind us of what we faced. Lastly, the IEBC should remove the suit they are wearing of justifying their actions, which I called the primary school head teacher syndrome, where they think they can load it on stakeholders. Let them consult, let them have a consensus in terms of agreement, and let the IBC call the third stakeholder, the media, to be part and parcel of their journey. Article 10 of the Constitution demands for accountability and transparency. What is so hard to bring the media in all their processes so that every step that the IBC is taking is completely put to the perspectives of this nation?
All right, Hussein, very quickly, I think I was discussing with somebody, and the objective that we had was that IBC today finds itself between a rock and a hard place. And the reason is what actually Dunstan has said. IBC, on every corner, they found themselves actually acting as, you know, they are always defending themselves. And I don't think that's a good thing when you are talking about a body that carries the word independent and heading into a general election. What I think should suffice on what I think really should happen is that these two senior stakeholders of this process, NASA and Jubilee, must sit down and ask what they want to give to Kenyans. Are we going to have a repeat of 2007? Because really they set a hallmark of what we are going to have after, you know, after the general election. So IBC comes in, to me, I think they are the only character here who are endangered species. And this is because I would agree with my friend when he says we need to have common ground. We need to have, or we need to work around a way for us to have a middle ground. But still, that still does not answer our question. as to why that will be, as to how that will actually bring credibility in it. Yes, we can argue and say, you know what, let's allow Al Ghurair to be able to print the ballot papers for these other, positions, and allow the presidential election to be printed by everybody. But you see, Jubilee will also come with their idea, you know what, it is because you want to do something, that's why you've nullified this process. So you have two sides, two divides that will consistently continue speaking. And that's why I'm saying goodwill must suffice between these two groups. What I would not want to see happen, Hussein, and I started, and I'm liking there's somebody who has actually tweeted or wrote, the lady from Kayole, and saying, you know what, you are taking us for a ride. You said this, now you've come up with this. You remember something that I told to one of the ladies here, who's now a NASA campaigner, presidential campaign. And what I was telling her was that if you give a mouse a cookie, tomorrow it will come for a glass of milk. That is what NASA has done. They've now come for another glass of milk. And if we still go over this issue of ballot papers, I guarantee you, Hussein, something else will crop up. Is that, how we want our election to appear in August 2008? I think goodwill must suffice.
But what if it's the truth?
Well, you see, again, if an allegation is compelled or proven to have an element of truth in it, then the facts must be laid on the table. But like Dunstan said, you see, in this Kenya of ours, hardly. And if we are talking about the credibility of the process, Hussein, let us not forget, and this is what I keep calling about, Gambia removed a dictator from power using a very simple process of counting marbles. Here we are talking about a serious technology that cannot give us a clear winner or a clear indicator as to how we will be able to run a credible election. We need to be serious.
Okay, fine, and thank you so much for your comments and for being with us. Finally, Sam Gituku has an update for us. Of course, he's at Intercontinental Hotel, IBC, holding a meeting, a consultative meeting with presidential candidates or their representatives about this matter of the Al Ghurair and the allegations against IBC on how that tender was awarded to Al Ghurair for printing ballot papers. Sam, we gather NASA now has the representatives there?
Yes, Hussein, there are some 4 persons who are representing the NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga. There is Norman Magaya from the NASA Secretariat. There is Paul Mwangi. There is Otende Omolo, the candidate for Rieda, and then there is a lady by the name Hamida Kibwana, all of them representing the National Super Alliance. I think that is the alliance that, rather the political formation that has the largest representation here, because looking at the other political parties, for instance, the Alliance for Real Change, I've only seen the candidate Abdul Badida, and then to do with the Third Way Alliance, I've seen the presidential candidate Ekuro Okot and one official, and then for the United Democratic Party, that is the presidential candidate by the name Kwajirongo, there are some 2 officials representing UDP. And then for the presidential candidate, who is an independent, Professor Michael Onaina, he's just himself. But in as far as the other 2 candidates, that is Dr. Jafet Kaluyu and Joe Nyaga, I've not seen any representation from them. And currently what's happening at the Intercontinental Hotel is that the IEBC officials and also the presidential candidates and their representatives are having refreshments before the meeting can begin, understandably also trying to see and wait whether they can be joined by the other presidential candidates or their representatives so that the meeting can begin. But of course, as I said earlier, the agenda is basically to seek consensus and also build confidence among the presidential candidates in as far as the tender to Al Ghurair is concerned. Hussein.
Right, thank you, Sam. Stay with us. We'll be talking to you later on Citizen Extra. We're taking a short break now. We'll be crossing over to Parliament after the break. Of course, MPs, the 11th Parliament is ours. John Ford could be its final break. We take a look at the successes and failures. So I guess in studio, thank you so much. Of course, there are those who will be staying with us. We're back after this.